Your neighbor points at you in the market square and says 3 words. Those 3 words are all it takes, and the crowd has already turned to look at you. She does not need evidence to say what she has just said. She does not need witnesses, and she does not need to have seen you do anything at all. The accusation has begun doing its work, and you can feel it happening. You have not been convicted of anything. You have not had any kind of trial or formal examination. But the way people are looking at you has already changed. The witch hunts of early modern Europe lasted from roughly 1450 to 1750. Over 40,000 people were executed across that period on this continent alone. Most of them were ordinary women living ordinary lives in ordinary villages. Most of them had done nothing that any reasonable person would call evidence of anything. This is what happened to you once someone decided to point in your direction. The village has been frightened for months before anyone points at you. The harvest failed last autumn, and 3 children died of fever before winter ended. The livestock have been sick, and one of the miller's horses fell dead without explanation. When things go wrong in a village, someone must be held responsible for them. God does not send suffering without reason, and reason implies that someone caused the suffering. The minister began asking questions from the pulpit several weeks before the accusation. He spoke about the devil's servants living among ordinary people completely undetected. He said the community had a duty before God to identify and remove them. The fear that had been accumulating since the failed harvest found its shape in those words. You did not know that you were already being watched before any of this happened. You live alone since your husband died 2 winters ago. You keep a small garden of herbs, and you know which plants treat which ailments. People in the village have come to you before when their children were sick. Your neighbor came to you last spring when her child had a persistent fever. You gave her a preparation of herbs, and the child recovered within a week. She was grateful then, and she told other women in the village what you had done. Then the child fell sick again in winter, and this time the fever did not break. She is not grateful about the spring recovery anymore. She is frightened, and she is grieving, and she needs somewhere to place both of those feelings. The argument you had with her over a fence line last autumn is easy to remember now. The way her cow stopped giving milk 2 days after that argument is easy to connect. The minister has told the congregation that witches cause exactly this kind of harm to their neighbors. The village's suspicion did not land on just anyone. It landed on women who lived alone, who knew about plants and remedies, or who had recently argued with a neighbor. It landed on women seen as past their useful years or too young to be trusted with independence. Women who were midwives, healers, or simply too independent for the community's comfort were the primary targets. The overwhelming majority of people executed across Europe during this period were women. The fear was not randomly distributed, and neither was the accusation that followed it. She stands in the market square and she points at you. The officials come to your door before the sun has finished setting. You are taken before you have had time to understand what is happening to you. By morning, you are in a cell, and the process that will end your life has already begun. The cell you are held in is cold and dark, and you are given very little to eat. This is not incidental to the process. Physical weakness made confession more likely, and confession was what the law required to proceed. You ask repeatedly to speak with someone who might help you, and you are told there is no such person. The law that governs your case does not permit you legal counsel of any kind. You are alone in this in a way that has been specifically designed to make you more vulnerable. The formal interrogation begins within days of your arrival. In the German territories where the persecution was most intense, the law structured everything against you. The magistrate questioning you held every role in the proceedings simultaneously. He was the judge and the investigator and the prosecutor and your defense counsel all at once. There was no one in that room whose job was to defend you or question the evidence against you. The outcome of the interrogation had been decided before you were brought into the room. The law required a confession before the trial could proceed to execution. The magistrate was therefore required by law to obtain one from you by whatever means were available. You are examined first for the witch's mark on your body. A witch's mark is any blemish, mole, scar, or unusual spot found anywhere on your skin. The examiner is looking for spots that do not bleed when pierced and do not register pain. A professional pricker has been brought in from another town to conduct this examination. These men traveled between villages across the region, charging fees for identifying witches. The more witches they identified in each location, the more they were paid for their services. Many of them used needles with retractable points designed so the needle never entered the skin. They pressed the false needle against a spot on your body and felt no resistance from the mechanism. The spot they pressed without breaking the skin did not bleed because no blood had been drawn. This was recorded in the official proceedings as evidence of a witch's mark. You are then subjected to the swimming test in the river outside the town. You are stripped to your undergarments, bound at the wrists and ankles, and thrown into the water. If you float, the water has rejected you because you rejected your baptism as a witch would do. If you sink, you are innocent, but there is a rope around your waist that may not be pulled in time. There is no version of this test that guarantees you leave the water alive. The interrogation continues after the swimming test with renewed intensity. Sleep is denied to you across multiple days and nights without interruption. After enough days of this, you say what they need you to say. You confess to attending gatherings you never attended and performing acts you never performed. You confess because the alternative is more of what has been happening to you. Then they tell you they need names of other women involved. You give them names because giving them names is the only way the current session ends. Each name you provide starts the same process over again for a different person. The accusation that began with your neighbor pointing at you has now expanded significantly. The people whose names you gave are being taken from their homes across the next several nights. They will be placed in cells and asked for names in their turn. This is how one accusation became 30 and 30 became 100. The system was not designed to find witches, it was designed to expand itself until the magistrate decided it was finished. The trial that follows your confession is not designed to determine whether you are guilty. You have already confessed, and the confession is the evidence the court requires. The fact that it was obtained through sustained suffering does not affect its legal standing. The verdict is that you are guilty of the charge brought against you. The sentence is death by burning at the stake. Burning was specified in the law because fire was believed to purify what other methods could not. You were an ordinary woman living in an ordinary village in an ordinary time. You grew herbs and helped your neighbors with their ailments when they came to ask. You had an argument over a fence line and your neighbor's child died of fever the following winter. None of those things were witchcraft by any reasonable standard of evidence. All of them were sufficient to end your life under the system that existed. What happened to you was not an isolated case or an exceptional miscarriage of justice. Between 1560 and 1670, over 40,000 people across Europe died in exactly this way. Germany was at the center of the persecution with more than 16,000 trials and 7,000 executions. Entire villages were emptied by accusation chains that began with a single point and spread outward. The prince-bishops of southern Germany oversaw mass trials that executed hundreds of people in a single season. Scotland prosecuted suspected witches with an intensity that matched the most severe German territories. The Spanish Inquisition, remembered as the most brutal institution of the period, actually killed far fewer witches than Protestant Scotland. The countries most associated with tolerance and popular memory were often the most lethal in practice. The swimming test, the paid prickers, the chain of forced accusation, the magistrate who was also your judge. None of it required evidence that would survive examination by any independent authority. None of it required witnesses who had actually observed you doing anything supernatural. It required one person in the market square who was frightened enough and angry enough to point. And once they pointed at you, escaping the process that followed became nearly impossible. The execution was public, and it was designed to be witnessed by the entire community. The community that watched was the same community whose fear had started the process. They watched because watching was expected and because they understood that not watching might be noticed. You did not need to be a witch to die as one. You only needed to be the person someone decided to blame.